Liam has now decided that he is being ganged up on. As we career through the streets of Paris at about 30 miles an hour, he opens the door and throws himself out. Liam is completely and utterly truthful. And his truth then was, I am a rock and roll star. So hats off to him for that, but there's a price to pay when all is said and done. And of course, he and I parted on particularly challenging terms. Kicks off, now furniture's being thrown around the club, and we're looking at each other, and he punches me in the face. And then he punches me in the face again. Bounced him off a bus stop and just looked at him. And he looked at me and he just went, you're fired.
Did you ever have the fear that anyone was going to do anything stupid to the lads? Iain, welcome to the show, mate.
Dodge, thank you.
It's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to this one.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah, good. Let's roll all the way back. Where did you grow up and how did you end up becoming Oasis's tour manager?
Well, where did I grow up? Military brat, basically. You know, my father was a PJI, PJI in the Royal Air Force. So born in Harrow, and then we moved straight away to Singapore. I spent a few years in Singapore. I can barely remember them, to be fair. And then a couple of postings to the UK, out to Germany, back into the UK. My father got the good news when he was 54, so I was about 13 years old. But at that point, they'd packed me off to a military academy, a place called Queen Victoria School in Dunblane, which is for the sons of Scottish soldiers, sailors, and airmen. And so that kind of led me quite naturally into a career in the forces. Although when I left school, I travelled for a couple of years, and then came back and went into the military.
And what was it for you, the next steps in military? Did you decide which one you wanted to go into?
Yeah, I mean, it was a weird one. My dad was a PJI, parachute jump instructor. You would think perhaps I'd move into the Royal Air Force, but I when I finished travelling, I came back to Weston-super-Mare. My dad's final posting was Royal Air Force Locking, and when he passed away, I just don't think my mum had the energy to move anywhere but what was on her doorstep. So she got a place in Weston-super-Mare, and I became great friends with a guy called Tim Tottle. Tim Tottle was a Royal. He was a Royal Marine. And I kind of liked that he would disappear and he would reappear, you know, and on occasion he would reappear with some exotic disease, and I like that even more, you know. In fact, I remember one night he'd just come back for the weekend, and we were in a club together, and he had dysentery. He'd been out in Belize and he came back with a dose of dysentery, and we're at the bar, and he literally soiled himself in his trousers at the bar. I had an apartment just around the corner, so he went to my apartment. Bear in mind that he's about 6 inches shorter than me and whiplash lean, you know. Yeah. And he got a pair of my trousers, came back into the club with my trousers pretty much tied around his waist and tied up at the feet just in case it happened again. And I thought this was impossibly glamorous. Do you know what I mean? And for whatever reason, perhaps because my old fellow was a PJI, rather than going down the royal route, I decided to join the parachute regiment.
And how was that for you? What age did you get into the parachute regiment?
Well, it was quite late because I'd travelled. Yeah. So, I mean, I can recall depot. I was 21 years old. I joined battalion still at 21, but I spent my 22nd birthday in Northern Ireland in County Fermanagh. And I can remember the night of my 22nd birthday, we were bashed up in a cemetery, awaiting for an extrication from a patrol that we'd been on. I was extraordinarily nervous because of the coincidences that tend to happen. First patrol, last patrol, birthday, Christmas Day, that kind of stuff. So, you know, I was very relaxed about all of the time that I spent out in Ireland, apart from that one night, which was my birthday.
And how hostile was it out there when you were there?
Well, I went out in 82, so it was still a place where you could get yourself killed. Yeah. But it wasn't anything like in those very, very early days, or even in the sort of mid mid to late 70s. But we were very aware, we took contacts, not many. And some of the contacts that we took, I think we imagined, if I'm completely honest.
What do you mean you imagined?
Well, you're at a very sort of heightened state. There's a guy called, and you're probably familiar with him, a guy called Robin Horsfall, who does, So he's ex-Hereford, and he was one of the few who actually was on the balcony. Yeah. And he likens Northern Ireland to that moment in a movie where the unit are on patrol and suddenly they realise they're in a minefield. And the music kind of reflects that. Every time you leave the safe area, you have that sense of possibility. So, you're at a heightened state. And so it doesn't take a great deal. A car backfires and you can assume a contact. And of course, we at that point, this is post Bloody Sunday. So the Reg are not allowed to police the built-up urban areas. So everything that we do is either, it's bandit country, it's Fermanagh, it's Armagh, it's rural stuff. It's proper soldiery, really. And so that's where I get the idea of imagined contact. Somebody fires a shotgun and, you will immediately take cover and try and get your head around what it is that's going on. So there were a couple of real contacts. And again, nothing significant. And perhaps a couple of imagined contacts as well.
And how long did you spend out in Ireland? I
did 2 tours, and each one of those was sort of 3-4 months, so spearhead tours basically, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's interesting actually. My life and my times in the parachute regiment, it's a bit like a football team. You can only play what's in front of you. And in the years that I served, we didn't do a great deal. I mean, I did some terrific soldiering. I had the great good fortune to soldier in the Oman. And I finished my time, and I was with one para pre-SFSG. And as you probably know right now, one para serve as sort of Special Forces support group. In my day, we were just we were a battalion. We were the 1st battalion, the parachute regiment.
So the SFSG is kind of the next step up before you get into the Special Forces.
It is. I mean, what you've got now is, if you were to go through Depot Para, you would leave Depot Para and join either 2 or 3 para. You can then volunteer for 1 para. And 1 para, there is a selection process now within the parachute regiment for 2 and 3 to become part of 1 para. And 1 para now serve literally as Special Forces support group. They go hand in hand with Hereford, is the long story short. So they have slightly different soldiering skills. I guess they're a halfway house between the Reg and 22.
And how long were you in the paras for in total?
I joined so Depot in 81, and I was gone by 87. I was in the music industry by 87.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What was that feeling like when you said, right, I've had enough of the paras now? What was the point where you said, I'm out?
Well, you know what? I was lucky because I didn't say I'm out. I served with a guy called Vivian Cook. So Vivian Cook is the prettiest man you've ever seen in your life, okay? But he also happened to be a European full contact Lao Gar Kung Fu champion. His twin brother, who is the other prettiest boy in the world, did not join the Reg. He stayed in Birmingham, which is where they are both from, and he started working in clubs, a place called the Rum Runner. And then he started looking after a band, pushing boxes, doing whatever was required for them. And that band became the biggest band. They were Duran Duran. They became the biggest band in the world,
Wow.
So Simon then graduated from pushing boxes and just general gopher and became their head of security. Now that job became quite simply too much for one person. So he reached back to his twin brother, Viv. So he reached back to Viv in the Reg and said, Viv, I need somebody on my right hand. I need somebody I can trust. Get yourself out and come and join me. So Viv, he left. He went and joined Simon. Very shortly after that, the trajectory of Duran went up and up and up. So Simon and Viv were like, we need somebody else. So Viv then reached back to me in the Reg.
Okay.
And he said, Robbo, we need somebody to support us, and I'd really like you to take the job. You've got time still to serve. I want you to buy yourself out and come across and start working with me and Simon. So basically, had that not happened, I'm sure I would have stayed in. I'm sure I would, because I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
How exciting!
It was fabulous.
Wow. What year are we talking here?
This would have been 80,
late 80s.
Late 80s it was, yeah. And in fact, in fairness, Duran Duran had already kind of imploded, and you had the Power Station and Arcadia. And the band that I ended up joining, although it was Duran when they approached, by the time I got out, it was Arcadia, which was Nick Rhodes and Simon Le Bon and Roger Taylor from the original band. Wow. And I made a complete pig's ear of it, Dodge, to be honest. Yeah, I was sacked within 48 hours of arriving. Yeah.
Go on.
Well, listen, I mean, basically, in my head,
I'm. And how old? You say late 80s, but how old were you?
I would have been sort of 27.
27.
Yeah,
okay.
27.
A tough,
a
hard man at the same time,
and a little bit. Look, and a paratrooper.
Yes.
You know. Yeah. And I say that with nothing but love.
Yeah.
But also a healthy dose of reality.
Yeah, okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My cultural boundaries had not expanded for me to sit comfortably in amongst, the likes of Simon Le Bon. And my first gig with Duran was Nick Rhodes' 25th birthday party in a little nightclub called Darves in Paris. So I fly to Paris. And I'm briefed by Simon and Viv Cook, right, in this apartment they've got on the Rue de Rivoli. And he's like, right, so you're going to need a float. So he gives me about 10,000 francs. You need 10,000. What the fuck do I need 10,000 francs for? He says, look, it's Nick's birthday. We've got a lot of guests hanging out. And he said, they're locusts. Yeah. They will and pillage. Yeah. You know what I mean? And the band want to be seen to be, the best of hosts. Yeah. So that night we had, on the guest list, we had Sting, we had Ronnie Wood, we had Grace Jones, we had all of Duran, or all of Arcadia, most of their wives, a serious smattering of French aristocracy, and me, and it's my first night on the job, and to be fair, I wasn't ready for it. Simon's brief to me was fundamentally, be cool, because the band don't like heavy security, and Jagger was there as well. I'm a huge Stones fan. Yeah. So I got Jagger and I got Ronnie Wood, and the brief I get given is to keep an eye on Jagger and on Ronnie. I was completely fucking in awe. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I was lost, quite frankly. Yeah. And but the point where I got sacked, and rightly so, by the way, rightly so. we had three brand new Jaguar XJSs, XJ6s on lease. Myself, Simon and Viv were carrying the great and the good from club to club to club to club. Rather than getting taxis, we would drive them. I'm sitting behind, I think it was Viv's Jag, in my Jag. And he's got Ronnie Wood and Ronnie's wife, and I think he's got Grace Jones and Nick Rhodes in there, and I think I've got Simon and whoever else. And I thought it would be hilarious if I gently took my car, pushed it up behind his car, and just slowly pushed him in, a little nudge into oncoming traffic. It's a manual car. Yeah. My foot slips on the clutch. I fucking thump into the back of his car, send him about 8 feet into oncoming traffic. Everybody in his car spins round in terror, and all I've got is just manic laughter. Yeah. You know what I mean? So anyway, the next morning after that particular night, Simon calls me in and he says, Robbo, he says, I've got a little bit of bad news for you, mate. He said, you failed the audition. He said, you've got to fly back to the UK. And that was me. That was my start and finish in a whirlwind. Yeah, absolutely. But Simon, bless his heart, he knew what I'd given up. Yeah. And he recognised that on his say-so, he'd reached out to me and I'd left something that I was enjoying and that I was good at and that gave me a future, a different future, but a future. And
purpose.
And a sense of purpose, without a doubt, And he organised for me to have an interview with Spandau Ballet. And I got the job with Spandau Ballet. And I knew, I'm a quick study. I knew I'd dropped a bollock. I knew I'd shot a robin. I knew whose fault it was. And I had a better understanding of what was expected. And
did you tell them that you were pissing around, or you're like, I just slipped off, could you not say, I was giving him a nudge?
I never had a chance to explain. They don't. It's not one of those. Robbo, come and have a chat, mate. What happened? What happened just there? It's what They slopey shoulder it down the line, and they don't want the embarrassment of firing you personally. They just pass the message down. But I knew what I was. I knew more about what I was doing when I started working with Spandau, and also. I started working with them in a slightly less rarefied atmosphere. I got to work with the band before I ended up sort of having to sort of be present around that kind of A-list universe, and it's really interesting. If you're going to work in that world, it's not complicated. The job is not complicated, whether that's security or tour management, as I ended up. What's difficult is people, is relationships. I'm going to say most people with who are half bright can take on the role of tour management or can take on the role of close protection if they have the skill sets. But it's the personality stuff that separates the good from the very good. Which is why it's I see these kind of university degrees in X and Y that will take you into tour management, and they will. But I'm not sure they'll take you into a job with the Rolling Stones. You know what I mean? That is you've got to have something
have
about
it inside, What was that feeling like from you coming straight out of the Paras, jumping into a job, getting sacked after 48 hours in a whirlwind, having a laugh, and then going, right, now I've got Spandau Ballet? You must be pinching yourself at this point, right?
Well, and here's the thing, because as a kid, I was a fan.
Yeah, but they're massive.
I was a fan. So it's in some respects, I had pictures of Bolan and Bowie and Roxy Music on the wall. I was a music fan. I bought their records the day that they came out. And so to be given the opportunity, it's slightly unusual really that I went into the Reg, if I'm completely honest, but that was Tottle and dysentery and exotic diseases. And, I thought, that looks like a bit of fun. I'll have some of that, So it was extraordinary to be in that company. And I had the great good fortune over the course of the following years to work with some of the most relevant recording artists of the 20th century and perhaps 21st century. I worked with Johnny Rotten, I worked with George Harrison, who of course is in the Beatles. I worked with John Lee Hooker, I worked with B.B. King, and eventually Oasis. So long answer to a short question.
Yeah.
How did I get in? Well, that's how I got in.
Yeah. It's not what you know.
It so often it isn't.
Absolutely.
You have to have the skill set.
Yeah.
And if I wasn't a quick study, and if Simon hadn't cut me some slack and organised that I had that secondary conversation with Spandau very shortly after Duran, it could have been a very different story. And it could have been as simple as flew to Paris, screwed it up completely, went back in.
Yeah. Did you know that in the back of your mind? If it doesn't work out, I know I can get back in. Because you had to pay yourself out, did you say?
I did.
How much? Can you remember how much it was?
250 quid.
And was that a lot of dough back then?
There was a lot of money there.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a lot of money.
And when you in the regiment, you go, right, I'm out, and they go, it's 250. Have you got a breathing off period where they treat you like crap because they know you're leaving? Or can you pay and leave that day?
No, you as you would imagine, the process is anything but straightforward.
Yeah.
You get a series of interviews where they try to a greater or lesser degree to change your mind, or they don't.
Okay.
Right.
What were they like with you?
They wanted me to stay.
Okay.
And actually, the final interview I had, they said, well, what if we give you a shot at becoming a Rupert? At becoming an officer, at going and doing sort of, doing Sandhurst. The only issue then is they said you will not be able to come back and serve with the parachute regiment.
Right, okay.
Having served as a Tom, the only way that you could then serve as an officer in the Reg is if you, and this is a very difficult thing to do, but I've got a couple of friends that have done it, you go all the way through the ranks and then you take a commission.
Yeah, okay.
And that's 30 years of anybody's life. And it just, the long story short is that everything that they put in front of me, everything that they tried to sort of persuade me with, it wasn't enough.
Okay.
I mean, the idea of as I saw it, I was going to go and join Duran Duran, make a sterling job of it, and I'm off and running.
Yeah.
So
how many years were you actually looking after these bands for before you actually said, right, I want to be a tour manager?
Well, I never said, and this is another one of those. John Lennon nails it. Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans.
Yeah.
Right. And
great quote,
isn't it?
Yeah. Great quote.
It is, and he's on it. He's absolutely on it. So I did. I went out and I did security with Duran Duran for an hour and a half. And I did Spandau for a lot longer. I guess I was with them for the best part of a year.
What were your movements after that band? How did you get into getting involved with Oasis?
Oasis came from just what I had a CV. Spandau, Zig Sputnik, the Choir Boys, Gary Moore, Sisters of Mercy. Did some of the blues artists,
Johnny Rotten
and Rotten. And I became friends with their manager, with Oasis manager, a guy called Marcus Russell, just through the industry.
Yeah.
And we had a shared interest in bands that we loved. So we were both huge fans of the Stones. We loved sort of country rock, alt country, Steve Earle, that kind of stuff. And I was in New York with a band called XCNN. Look them up, they're brilliant. They did nothing, but they're brilliant. And we were playing at the same venue for the same show as Oasis. And at this point, I think Shaker Maker had been released and Supersonic had been released. So there was a buzz in the UK. Not so much in the States. There was an awareness in the States that they had something, but it wasn't the same kind of level as it was in the UK. And actually, even in the UK, they were still playing little small venues. But we're on the same bill. So I watch Oasis for the first time in Manhattan, on the Lower West Side, a little club called, what was it called? Doesn't matter. They weren't even headlining. There was a band called Moist who were headlining. And they were just off the scale. If you can imagine Oasis in 1994, all of that anger, all of those dreams unrealized, all of that potential unfulfilled. And they're playing in a room maybe twice the size of this studio, Dodge, right? And they gave it everything. Every single person in the audience that night was lobotomized. It was just brilliant. So we're staying in the same hotel. Again, coincidence. And I have a drink with Marcus and Bonehead and Gwigsy from the band. And I said to Marcus, I said, mate, I really, really, really want to work with you and with Oasis. I said, I know you can't afford me at the moment. I said, but you're going to be able to afford me. And when you can afford me, give me a call. 2 weeks later, there was that much publicised incident where Noel is on a stage in Newcastle. A member of the audience gets up out of the audience, punches him in the face.
That's
right.
Yeah.
And I heard this on the radio and I thought my phone's going to ring.
Yeah.
And it did. And it was Marcus. And he said, right, we need you. He said, we can't really afford you. And this is the thing to understand. No matter how hot a band is, no matter how much you see them, perhaps in this or that, journal and across the media, and they're on top of the pops, they ain't got any money necessarily. It takes a long time for money to arrive. And the going rate back in the day, my going rate back in the day, back in 94, was about £300 a day, which is a decent screw then. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did a deal with Marcus because I genuinely wanted to work.
Did you see something in them that you knew they were going to smash it?
Yeah. Listen, I did not. I would love to say that. Yeah, I saw instantly that they would be global. So I did not.
Yeah.
But what I did see was that this was a band with integrity. This was a band that were true to themselves, and this was a band that looked like a rock and roll band. You know what I mean? And behaved like a rock and roll band, and I'm a sucker for that. And I thought, I want to, that's where I want to be in your gang. Is the long story short, And so this thing in Newcastle, Noel gets punched in the face. Marcus picks up the phone, and I go in initially to head up the security. They give me the job, and then Marcus says, right, we're off to the States. Great, you're not coming. We can't afford it. Fine. when we get back, we'll have a little sit down and we'll make a plan. Great. This was the American tour where the wheels fall off at the whiskey, right? So Oasis make some poor decisions about after hours activity. They take a lot of crystal meth and they can't deliver the show. And this is the show where Noel storms off the stage and literally goes across, takes the tour float, which is all the money they've got to sustain themselves in America without resupply, and disappears. Tim Abbott, was part of the Creation Records team. He was a managing director there, but he's great mates with Noel. In the end, Tim Abbott flies out to the States and he finds him. And I think he was either in San Francisco or Vegas, doesn't really matter. And because of that, Marcus phoned me up again and said, right, I'm going to change the job role. He said, I want you to do security because we need somebody, but I want you to road manage the band as well. He says, we need somebody with a slightly firmer grip on things. And that was that. And again, I suppose it's in part who you know. But also at that point, I had a really good CV, Dodge.
Yeah, good reputation.
I had a good reputation. I knew what I was doing. I'd proved myself with some difficult artists. And I think Rotten was the one for Oasis. They, I don't know what conversations they had between themselves, but at some point, somebody would have asked, who else has he worked with? Yeah. And on that list would have been Rotten. And Rotten is an Oasis icon, in the same way that Lennon, McCartney are,
What was Johnny Rotten like? Because he comes across like a madman, but at the same time, he's so articulate and clued up and sharp.
Rotten is two things that you might not expect of Rotten. The first one, you've nailed it. He's very smart. Very smart. The second one is he's very kind. He's a really decent, kind person. And two good examples of that. Smart. When I worked with them, it wasn't Pistols era. It was Public Image Limited.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I'm driving Johnny and his manager up to Glasgow. And we'd done a gig in Aston Villa on our way up to Glasgow. And we got there and we're in the dressing room, just Johnny and I. And he's slipped away around the corner. He said, I'm going to pop on, mate. Rob, I'm going to go on my own, mate. It'll all be good. Okay. He's gone round the corner from the Barrowlands, which was the venue that we were playing. One of the iconic venues across the UK. Stunning place, 2,500 capacity, I guess. And he slipped it, but it's in a very working class part of town. The Barrows is what used to be their kind of open markets, and it's still reflective of that today, or certainly then. And Rotten's gone round the corner. He's popped himself into a sleazy little bar pub, and he sat down in amongst 20 or 30 hardened afternoon blue collar Glaswegian drinkers. Everybody in that bar wants to buy him a drink. Yeah, everybody knows who he is. Everybody wants to buy him a drink. And he comes back, and now we're sitting in the dressing room, and we're chatting about what's just happened. And he's discussing with me how that moment made him realise exactly the degree to which he had impacted all of our kind of cultural identities. If he, a Sex Pistol, can slip into that space,
that's
right? Blue collar, they might have worked on the shipyards, right? All of them want to make and break bread with him. All of them want to chat to him. All of them want to buy him a drink. He said, I get it. He said, I get it. And the conversation between us, Dodge, is like this. We're chatting, right? Really on point, really articulate, really thoughtful. The promoter walks into the dressing room. Now, the promoter's dropped a few bollocks over the course of the day, and Rotten is not thrilled with him at all. So Rotten leaps up, right? We've both got a little bottle of lager on the go. Rotten leaps up. You fucking this, you fucking that, you. Picks up his lager, hurls it across the dressing room, right? Smashes behind the promoter, deliberately, I'm sure, right? Deliberate miss, I'm sure. Promoter shits himself, leaves the dressing room at speed, slams the door behind him. Rotten sits down, opens another bottle of lager, looks at me and he says, well, they expect it of me. Yeah. He understood that Johnny Rotten is a suit of armour.
Yes.
He puts it on,
Yeah.
he takes it off, you know. But as a human being, A, very smart, that's evidence of that, and B, very kind.
That's nice to hear, you know.
Mate,
he's very kind.
He's fabulous.
Yeah.
He's absolutely fabulous.
He just speaks sense. When he's on telly, he speaks sense, doesn't he? Like when he comes on, you're like, mate, that's not the Johnny Rotten I know. You see him on telly going mad.
Yeah.
You know?
Johnny Rotten for fucking Prime Minister, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Is it too late?
Quickly vote.
Is it too late? Yeah.
Tell me, what's the difference between Liam Gallagher and Noel Gallagher?
I think, okay, in my opinion, I need to qualify this.
Yeah.
The Liam Gallagher and the Noel Gallagher that I knew existed in 94 and 95.
Yeah.
Now, nobody strays too far off the beaten path, do you know what I mean, when it comes to DNA and character. But if I'm completely honest, people ask me in the here and now, are they going to get back together again? And I'm like, well, you're better off asking Pep Guardiola, right? Or somebody in the Manchester City Premier first team, because they're probably closer to the brothers than I am. But they probably haven't, you know, the apple hasn't fallen too far from that tree in terms of character. The fundamental difference is Liam is completely and utterly truthful. And by which I mean he has that kind of knee-jerk emotional truth response, right? He doesn't filter anything. Okay? You and I have a conversation. I guarantee at every touch point in that conversation, we're filtering. We're determining to what degree do I want to tell this story, you know? To what degree do I want to open up? How much of myself do I want to show here? Or even, that's a contentious opinion in this company, do I want to share it? Liam has none of that. His truth, he will bear regardless of consequence. And I think there's so much integrity in that. Noel, on the other hand, is very measured, is very guarded, is very thoughtful, and has one eye always on consequence. And one eye down the road. A strategist, if you like, you know. And that's the big difference. The big difference.
Did you find that Noel had to rein Liam in?
Nobody
could. Okay.
One person could rein Liam in.
The mum.
Yeah. Yeah. On that tour, 94, 95. So I joined them in 94, worked through 94 and most of 95.
95 is when they really, 94, 95 is when they really blew up, wasn't it?
It was, and this is, I think this I find particularly interesting looking back, because if you listen to the interviews of that era, you would be forgiven for believing that certainly Noel and Liam were utterly convinced that their success and the level of their success was written in the stars, was a biblical prophecy, you know. But there was no prophecy, and certainly there was no prophecy that the band could see. Every day, as it lifted and lifted and lifted, as the tickets sold faster, as the venues got bigger, every day was a surprise to the band as much as it was to anybody else who was watching, whatever they said to the contrary. And you know, a really good example of that is that they were promoted then, probably still are actually, by SJM. Yeah. That's a company that Simon Moran.
I know Simon.
Oh, he's a lovely man. Lovely man. Absolutely lovely.
There's not
man.
anyone sharper than him on figures, numbers, how much things are, what it costs, He's got this photographic memory, which is immense.
Complete. Yeah. And he's a decent bloke.
Yeah,
he is. So Simon had booked the band. We've been playing theatres.
And he gets back to people.
He remembers your name, he remembers your face.
And you know when you phone someone and it's 3 days, day 4, day 5, sorry Dodge, I've been really busy, I haven't missed you, bam. Yeah. He's not one of those that just fades away just because he's big time.
Yeah. Well, you know, no, he's a good egg. Simon is a really good egg.
He's a lot of time.
Yeah, he has earned a lot of money.
He's put on all those major tours and all those massive
But he puts
stadiums.
He puts his money where
he puts
his mouth is.
And he started from nothing.
Yep, he puts his money where his mouth. He got the Take That reunion.
That's right.
Because he walked into the office and he wrote a check there and then for £5 million.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, and which was head and shoulders more than anybody else was prepared to take a risk on. You know, and
he's got his hands in so many pies.
Well, he's a bright man, and everybody around him. You know, Rob Ballantyne, who was his commercial director, perhaps he still is.
He also owns a rugby club. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Does he really? Yeah. Wigan, surely.
Warrington.
Right.
Rugby League club. Okay. The stadium. That's how caked he is. Do you know what I mean? I'll have some of that for his local club. Do you know what I mean? That's amazing.
Yeah. But anyway, so Simon's booked the tour.
Yeah.
And
this is a stadium tour around the UK.
No.
This is a worldwide tour.
No, he only does the UK.
Yeah.
He only did the UK. I don't think he's ever done any European shows for Oasis.
Okay.
May have changed since my day, but certainly back in the day, 94, 95, Simon booked us in the UK. And we'd been playing places, like the Astoria gone now. It's a 2,000 capacity, the Brighton Centre, Southampton Guildhall, those sorts of places. Yeah. We went off and did some stuff in Germany to nobody, right? And that's the thing to remember. In different territories, the band's standing was at a very different level.
Yeah.
So we could be looking great in the UK. I remember in Salt Lake City, for example, at the same time as it was all kicking off in the UK, Noel sitting outside a venue and busking. He made $1.84, right? Nobody knew the fuck he was. So everything's happening at a slightly different pace. So we were out in Germany, playing to 200 people, 300 people a night. We came back.
Why, just out of interest, why go to Germany to play in front of 200 people? Was it for the experience? Was it for a little bit of exposure? Was it to get the press there, to have a look at them? What was the thought process behind it?
Well, bear in mind that Germany as a marketplace is huge.
Yeah.
As a contemporary music marketplace, it's huge. There's money to be made there, and the vision for any label, and certainly for Marcus, and certainly for the band, was global domination. For that to happen, you have to go to these places and play. And I'll tell you this about the band, they grafted. Did they play hard? Absolutely. But they grafted. They understood what was necessary, and they were more than happy to put the hours, the days, the weeks in, But anyway, back to this this idea that I have. This is my point of view. I have to think I'm right, but is that they didn't really know. Although they said they knew, they didn't really know. Simon, we've come back from Germany, playing 200, 300 people. Sold out, but 200, 300 people. Simon's booked us in at our first arena, and that was Sheffield. Liam, Marcus, Simon, and I took a wander down to the arena just to take a look at it, and do a little bit of a recce. And we got up on the stage. Liam looks at the arena empty. It's huge. I mean, this is, I think, 11,500 people. So we've gone from 2,000 to 11. That's a big jump. It's a big jump. And just the geography of it, right? Liam turns around to Simon and tears him a new arsehole. This is fucking ridiculous. We won't sell half enough tickets to fill this venue. Simon turns around and he says, it's done. Hour and a half. And Liam was like, steps up to the edge of the stage, empty arena, and just shouts at the back wall, come on!
Quality.
Noel was elsewhere with Johnny Marr, actually. I think, and again, this was an indication of things that were moving. He spent, I think, £9,000 on 3 guitars, So it's all just beginning to fall into place then. But the certainty wasn't there. They talk certainly, they interview certainly, but the certainty wasn't there. Every day was a journey.
Was Liam and Noel tight then? When you were there, or could you see something getting in the way? When did the drugs really kick in and the booze?
The drugs, I'm going to suggest that the drugs kicked in probably after my departure.
Okay.
Were there drugs? Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, my interview with Oasis, obviously this is not your conventional job interview. It never is with a rock and roll band, right? It never is. So with Oasis, it was twofold. At that point, the entire touring party was 10 people. 5 of them were in the band, right? We were few and we were far between. And that meant that the crew were particularly important and a particularly important dynamic. So I had to be interviewed both by the band and by the crew. The band interview basically took place at the Astoria, and I handled security and took care of the press and all those other sort of road manager type roles. And then there was a party being thrown for them literally over the road, and I handled that for them as well. And I remember halfway, it's probably about 2:00 in the morning, the party was going to run until about 5:00 in the morning, and Noel came up to me and he said, "Look after these for me." And he gave me a pair of black hush puppies, his black hush puppies. And I thought to myself, I've got this. Noel does not give over possession of his hush puppies to just anybody, and he expects to see me again tomorrow morning. It's all good. The crew interview was with Coyley, Mark Coyle. Now, Mark Coyle was their front of house sound engineer in those early years, and actually produced, co-produced, definitely maybe, and was a huge part, and had been, I think he worked with the Inspiral Carpets with Noel as well. They go back a long, long way. And Coyley's interview with me was as simple as, "Do you take drugs?" And the wrong answer is no, you know. And obviously, coming out of the Regiment, the music industry, I will put my hand up. Over the course of those years, there were occasions where I experimented.
As you do.
Behind me now, Dodge. It's all behind. It is all behind me now. I'm 400 years old now, for Christ's sake. You know what I mean? But
what was the feeling like knowing that you got the job with Oasis, knowing that you're looking after them, knowing that you're taking them to all the gigs? Did you ever have the fear that anyone was going to do anything stupid to the lads?
No, I really didn't.
No, okay.
I really didn't. And the reason for that is I'm going to come back to, at this point, this is not my first rodeo, you know. And Mark Billy Billingham, who ex-Reg, ex-Hereford, and then went in to do a lot of serious celebrity close protection. He calls it, if you are, to paraphrase Johnny Cash, kicking and a gouging in the mud and the blood and the beer, then you've dropped a bollock. Yeah. That is not your job. Your job is to see what's around the corner. And your job is to make sure that those situations never arise. And that is good security. And I had complete confidence in my ability to be able to do that. Brilliant. In addition to which, you know, if you're on a tour bus, there's
anything goes.
Nothing, but nothing's going to go wrong. You know what I mean? Nothing's going to go wrong.
Were you travelling on the tour bus with them?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, this is, we lived, firstly, we lived cheek by jowl 24/7. Secondly, in those very early days, we shared rooms. Yeah. Right? The band shared rooms. No, the only person who had his own room was Noel. So I shared with Jason Rhodes, who was their guitar tech, backline technician. Phil Smith shared with Coyley. Maggie had her own room because Maggie's Maggie. And then, let me see, Bonehead shared with Tony, and Gwigsy and Liam shared. And Noel, and that was it. That was, you know, it was that, you know, and it was that. And we moved together. You could throw a blanket over us in those early days, you know, where one was, we all were. It was a proper gang mentality.
That was a lovely feeling.
It was fabulous.
I bet.
Oh, mate, it was fabulous.
I bet.
It was like the Clash were a gang, and I suspect the Stones were a gang, and I suspect the Beatles were a gang, you know, and it was a great privilege.
I bet.
Great privilege.
What was your? Give me your day to day. Like, you're going on tour, the boys are going on at 8:00 at night. What was your day-to-day movements? Were you like making sure that they were in the right place at the right time, making sure that security was on the stage? Give me an example. And what would you do straight after? They obviously go party, and then what would your movements be?
I mean, I'm going to say a typical day, but there weren't really any typical days. There were broad similarities. Most of the day is going to be taken up with press and promotion. Yeah. And actually, in those early days, when we had very little in the way of infrastructure and very little in the way of crew, but they were as hot as a pistol, that's really challenging because everybody wants a piece of you. Yeah. And what you've got to remember is that if it is I've probably got the time zones wrong. Doesn't matter. You'll get the point. If it's 6 p.m. in Salford, or rather, if it's 2 a.m. in Salford, it's 6 p.m. in Singapore, and it's 12 in the afternoon in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
So I would have to have the boys ready for an interview at 3 a.m.
Okay.
At 4 a.m.
Just to trigger the other territories.
Right,
Okay.
absolutely,
Yeah,
because everybody wants to know.
Yeah.
And of course,
and then just for the listeners and anyone watching out there, this is pre-social media, so it wasn't a quick flip.
Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah, absolutely not. And the other thing, of course, is that in those early days, the media is really important, right? When the band are the biggest band in the world, well, that's when the media wants you. But when you are establishing yourselves and nothing is written in the stars yet, you need to do those interviews. Yeah, you need to win the media over. Absolutely. You need to do the graph, So, there'd be occasions where I'd be dragging Liam out of bed at 5 a.m. or Noel out of bed at 5 a.m. So the day could start at 5, And then, you're not going to get your head in. We might not have finished until 3 or 4, or we might not have finished. So they're straight into the whole kind of press and promotion hamster wheel is what it is. And then in and around that, you've got whatever the logistics are for the day. And it might be as simple as a tour bus from London to Cardiff, but it also might be we're flying to Tokyo.
Yeah.
Did
you notice, like a boxer's a multi-millionaire, he's not going to go train at 5 a.m. in his silk pajamas. You know the saying?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Did you notice, as they were grafting, they had to be at the press release, do all the press, they had to do everything they can. They were like, bring it on. Was there a point when they were like, I can't be bothered to do that?
You have absolutely nailed it.
Okay.
And if you bear in mind that the career of the band before they split was decades plus, that crack, fuck this, came very early.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And certainly by the time that I left, the novelty of being interviewed, initially, NME, MTV, BBC, wow, bring it. Bring it. Talk to me. Very quickly, because this was, they were getting it from all sides, from all around the world, wherever we were, whenever we were there. This label from this territory would set up ridiculous schedules of press and promotion, and they did it with great good humour, and then they didn't, because actually suddenly what was an exciting new development in their lives became same old, because actually there's not that many imaginative journalists out there. So it's the same cycle of questions again and again. And with the best will in the world, Noel notwithstanding, he always got it. That's not what they signed up for. They signed up to be rock and roll stars. They signed up to pin your head to the back of a room in this or that venue on this or that gig night. They didn't sign up for the politics. They didn't sign up for, to be questioned and queried. They certainly didn't sign up to be questioned and queried at whatever the hell time it was when they still had their head up their arse.
How did the deals work then? Are they signed by a record label to do a tour, or are they signed by the record label for a certain amount of years?
Well, firstly, they're signed to a record label.
Yeah. So give me an example.
Well, an example might be really simple. I sign you, Dodge, because you're a fucking killer singer-songwriter. I know that. Not a lot of people know that about you.
2 left feet.
Terrific singers. So I'm going to sign you. I'm going to sign you for 5 years. And in that 5 years, you're going to give me 3 albums.
Okay, so the pressure's on.
Yeah. And you go, I'd love to.
Yeah.
Back in the day, there might be an advance. There is very little in the way of an advance these days. Right. And bear in mind, if there's an advance, it's recoupable. It's a loan. Yes. It's got to be paid back. Right? Double-edged sword. So you've got that contract with the label. Now the label's side of the bargain is to promote you. Okay. So if they're global, then they will start setting up promotional activity. The most effective of which, obviously, is to go and play live.
Yeah.
Okay. So now they contract with an agent and a promoter, and it's the agent's job to find you the shows and to get you an offer. Okay. So, let's say for the sake of argument, in the early days when they're playing places like King Tut's, A, they never had an agent. B, they probably paid for free.
Where's King Tut's?
King Tut's is Glasgow. Now that's where Alan McGee saw them for the first time and signed them. So that's a critical moment in their history, and I wasn't with them then.
So that record label was saying, right, you're in for 5 years.
Yeah.
That record label then finds an agent. An agent then goes and gets the venue and does a deal with the promoter to pay the record label the money guaranteed up front.
That's it. The agent will go to the promoter rather than to the venue.
Yeah.
So, if you're going to play in the north.
So if I'm a promoter in southwest London, they would come to me and go, Dodge, we want 100 G's for them up front. I go, there's your 100 G's. If I sell this amount of tickets, that's mine. My break even is 14,000 people. Up to 20, that's my profit.
It's exactly that. It's exactly that. But there's also, it's interesting because the contracts nowadays are favoured heavily in favour of the artist. Used to be in favour of the promoter.
The promoter back in the air.
Now, and actually,
but that's the same in boxing.
Is it really?
Yeah, it used to be back. It's changed back into the box.
Yeah. Well, and it's probably very similar. Yeah. If you break percentage, right? So you'll have a minimum guarantee of X against a number of tickets, probably about 80% sold. The remainder of that 20%, if you do 100% of the tickets, the artist will take 80, maybe 90% of the sale of those tickets.
Wow, okay. So it's in their interest as well to push boundaries.
To do the promotion. So
if they were contracted for 5 years with someone, that record label now owns them because they've given them a huge amount of money up front.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
And if those boys are using copious amounts of cocaine, booze, crystal meth, E's, that's not conducive to feeling energetic to be doing everything that they're told to be done in the contract.
It is definitely counterproductive. Yes. And one of the biggest challenges that anybody has with any artist, if they're using, is exactly that. And again, in my time, 94, 95, were they taking drugs? Yes. This is no scoop, right? Oasis took drugs. Yeah. Well, what a Kelsapri's, right? No. They were largely a fast drugs band. It was coke. Gwigsy a bit of weed, Bonehead nothing. Right, drugs are for students was his standpoint.
And he was clean the whole time.
Clean the whole time. He liked to drink.
Play.
He liked to drink. You could see a lot of red wine off. Yeah. But no, he never touched a drug.
Did you ever touch anything?
I did.
When you were with them?
I did.
Actually, in their presence.
It was only in their presence. Okay. So for me, it would be at the end of a day. It would come back to the typical day. So we've done all the promo. Then we've sound checked. Then we've done some more promo. Then we've done the show. Then we've gone out or we've gone back to the hotel. At some point, there is a determination made that we're going to get rid of everybody, and it will just be the core, basically. So it might be Liam and Noel and Gwigsy and Jason and me and Coyley in a hotel room somewhere. And on those occasions, if there was nothing to do, early doors the following day, I'd get involved with them. Yeah.
One of the perks of the job.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
did you feel like you should do?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
No, that's not fair. Yes.
Obviously, you've got to take your own responsibility. But did you feel like if I don't, they're going to look at me weirdly that maybe I'm judging them?
There would undoubtedly be an element of that, but that I will not pretend for a second that was the driver behind my decision. I made the decision to be a part of it because I wanted to be a part of it. Yeah. Because I wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to be in the gang, and as with any gang, there are unwritten, unspoken rules.
That's right.
And back to Coyley's interview with me, do you take drugs?
Yeah.
And there would be a certain degree of distrust. Yeah.
Have you seen the lads since?
Yes. I haven't seen Liam. And of course, he and I parted on particularly challenging terms. I see quite a bit.
What do you mean parted on challenging terms?
Well,
did you see eye to eye to him?
I'll turn to this now, Dodge.
Yeah. Which is your book.
It is, yeah.
Oasis, what's the story?
Not going to flog it to death.
No, but I will. Okay. Life on Tour with Liam and Noel Gallagher. Anyone out there, go and check it out. Go and Google it and you'll see amazing photos and amazing stories in there.
Well, one of the stories is how my relationship, A, with the band, or rather A, with Liam and then B, with the band, came to a close. We went to Paris to do some promo, and it was just Liam and me and Gwigsy and Alan White, who had taken over the drumming duties from Tony McCarroll by then, and a young lady from the record company. Everything going brilliantly, other than the fact that they'd got on it from the second we turned up in Paris. And the final interview was a radio station, and they decided to do it away from the hotel in a nightclub. So we rock up at the nightclub, and they're hammered. Liam is absolutely hammered. And they've also decided that the interview will be a two-parter, a double-header. So they've got Liam and they've got Eddie Izzard, right? So Eddie Izzard is in that kind of black latex, orange latex lipstick and nails phase, which I've got to tell you was a challenging persona for Liam to deal with, kind of sitting as close as you and I are doing the interview. Eddie Izzard speaks really good French, and he begins answering the questions in really good French, at which point the interview shifts away from being about Liam and Oasis and moves into, perhaps quite naturally, Eddie and what Eddie's up to. Liam is not thrilled with this at all. Kicks off, now furniture's being thrown around the club, tables are being upended, bottles are being thrown, all of those good things. And he's gone. And I've got Gwigsy and Alan are like, well, here we go, and I've gone, stay here, I'll sort this. So I've gone after him. We've gone together to a bar that the band used to enjoy in Paris. I don't know if it's still there. Lily La Tigresse, right? Strippers on the tables and the best margarita in France. All right, I don't know why we spent so much time there. And so we're in Lily's together, and we're having a drink, and I'm trying to calm him down, and we're getting there. I said, right, let's go back, let's find Gwigsy, let's find Alan, and we can finish this night on a slightly better tone. And Liam agrees, so we go back out to the car, and then Linda's found us from the record company. Linda and Liam fall out about God only knows what. I think it was basically Linda was in charge of press. So Liam then saw it as being Linda's responsibility that this interview had taken the turn that the interview had taken. It wasn't her fault. I've defended Linda. Liam has now decided that he is being ganged up on. So quite naturally, as we career through the streets of Paris at about 30 miles an hour, he opens the door and throws himself out. My immediate reaction is to open my door and throw myself out. So now we're both rolling arse over tit down the streets of Paris, right? Dead seriously. And we stand, and he's shaking himself off and I'm shaking myself off. I think I've landed a bit more elegantly than he has, do you know what I mean? But I was trained. And we're looking at each other, and he punches me in the face. And then he punches me in the face again. And I'm like, well, I didn't see that coming. And I thought, well, I can't hurt him. I literally picked him up, carried him off the road, bounced him off a bus stop, and just looked at him. And he looked at me and he just went, "You're fucking fired." Merc comes back around. Liam jumps back into the Merc and he disappears. And I'm thinking, what do I do? And I went back to the hotel, picked up the phone to Marcus, their manager, and I just said, "Look, mate, this has happened." I said, "I'll be honest with you, our relationship, mine and Liam's, has been deteriorating. I think we've got to a point of no return here. So I'm going to jump. I don't kid myself that I wouldn't have been pushed in any event." And our relationship had deteriorated. And this is because, and it's exactly what you pointed out, in that transition from, I can't get enough interviews, I can't get enough press, I want to talk about myself 24 hours a day, to, oh, Jesus, really? It's 5 o'clock in the morning. I ain't doing it. My job was, I know it's 5 o'clock in the morning. I don't care. I know you got somebody in that bed with you. Get out, get your clothes on, get downstairs, do the press. That's what I'm there for. Now, how do you do that? You can either do it by blowing smoke or you're a little bit more proactive. I was a bit more proactive. There's a reason for that. The tour I did before Oasis was a band called BBM. This was Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker from Cream. Two of the most iconic British artists that ever graced the stage, most influential, you know. And Gary Moore, who was taking the Eric Clapton role. And I was a great fan. As a result of which, Dodge, when I tour managed them, I basically blew smoke and I kissed ass. And it was jump how high. Yeah. It was the most unpleasant experience I've ever had on the road. It was, you know, because they had no respect for me at all. And I determined when I went into the Oasis camp, I'm not doing that again. So I'm going to be, and I was too proactive, too, there. You know, and the rest of the band were able to handle that. Liam wasn't. You know, and so as far as I'm concerned, it's 50-50 ball. It's not that he's an arsehole. It's not that I was too much of this or too much of that. And it comes back to what I said at the top of this conversation. It ain't, you know, knowing how to tour manage is it's the people thing. Yeah. And I got it wrong.
Takes a strong man to admit that.
It took me years in my own head. I bet it did, yeah. It took me years to go, down to you, mate. My part. It's down to you.
Yeah. What was your relationship like before that happened, though? Because that's not just a quick...
No.
He's off his nut and he's in the club and he's getting angry with you. There must have been some sort of build-up that he's going, you know what, you're annoying me. You're being too pushy for me. What was that? Did you sense that?
It manifested itself first. I mean, there was he was always the least keen to get up at 3, 4, 5 a.m. and fulfill press duties because to his credit, he lived truthfully. And his truth then was, I am a rock and roll star. He lived like a rock and roll star more than anybody else in the band, all right? And we expect that of our rock and roll stars. That is absolutely not a criticism because if he didn't live like that, Oasis are not Oasis.
That's right.
Liam is not Liam. Yeah. The anger, the energy, the you know, that magic, it's not there. You know, it's not there. So hats off to him for that, but there's a price to pay when all is said and done. So there were many instances where we were on the opposite side of the ring, for want of a better word. You know what I mean? It's like, you have to do this. I don't want to do this. You have to do this, right? And it was always, from his point of view, it was shoot the messenger. It was shoot the messenger. And there was a particularly momentous occasion. We went and did Later with Jules Holland. And at that point, Paula Yates, rest in peace, was still with us and she was the co-presenter. She had it hot for Liam, big time. And so we did the show and then there was a party afterwards. It wasn't much of a party, it was at the BBC, you know what I mean? But there was a party afterwards. And Paula made a beeline for him. Basically, you know, take me to the toilets and then we can go out together and cause a sensation. Right? Seriously. And anyway, so it didn't happen and we left. Brighton, we played Brighton a few weeks later and Paula's at the show.
Out the blue?
Out the blue. Okay. And now I'm not a great believer in coincidence. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit like the old, it's a bit like the Romans and the Christians and there just happened to be some lions there. It wasn't a coincidence and I don't think it was a coincidence that Paula was there. And we had to get from Brighton to Sheffield, go figure, right? That's the agent's plan. But no, Middlesbrough. Now that's a hell of a journey. So we'd gone
that's like 6-7 hours.
Right, and we'd gone to a club afterwards, not the best idea in the world, but Brighton then was home to Bobby Gillespie and the Throb from Primal Scream. Throb, R.I.P. So we're going to go, we're going to show our face. We went to the Zap Club, we hung out.
Zap Club. Quality club.
Yeah, right. So we're in Zap and we're hanging out, and but I've got to get them back onto the bus at 2 a.m. And at 2 a.m. I find Liam. Everybody's no drama at all. Liam's no drama. Yeah. Cool. I'll come straight away. Fucking hell. All right. So anyway, we're walking back, and as we come around the corner to where the bus is waiting for us, they're all loading up. Liam's gently kind of shading back from me, and as I turn round, he's heading off in the opposite direction. And I've gone, whoa. And I've started following him. He starts running. So now I'm chasing Liam through the streets of fucking Brighton. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And he ends up at a hotel. And at the front door of the hotel is Paula Yates. Yeah. And Liam says, Robbo, mate, I'll make my own way to Middlesbrough. I'm like, there's not a fucking chance in hell that's going to happen. You know, no, you got to come with me. You know, and then Paula puts her Tuttonsworth in to Liam, are you a man or a mouse? We have a proper kick-off about whether he is or whether he's not getting on the bus. The long story short is he gets on the bus, but we've had a proper, verbal tear-up. And so I speak to Noel I said, Noel, you might want to have a word with Marcus and probably with Liam, because I don't think he's that impressed with me at the moment. I've done my job. As the bus leaves Brighton, I'm sort of sitting there and looking out the window, and Marcus and Liam and Noel are having a chat at the front of the bus. And Noel comes along, he says, right, Robbo, he says, this is my band, and I decide who's in it, and I decide who's out, and you're in. So there's been some kind of debate then.
So Noel come back and said that to you? Okay.
Noel and I've had a terrific relationship.
Okay.
Throughout.
Okay.
Throughout. And I saw.
Was he easier to deal with, Noel?
Oh Christ, yeah, he was, because he was a thinker.
Okay.
When I say he was a strategist, yes, he was, but he wasn't like sort of it wasn't like sort of, what's that geezer in Despicable Me? It wasn't sort of, you know what I mean? It was just, he knew what was going on.
He knew boundaries.
He did. And he could see 1, 2, 3
was
steps
he driving the band forward more than Liam, do you feel? Was he dragging Liam along with him at some point?
Liam was not dragged anywhere by anybody. Okay. That the anger and the energy and the truth that Liam brought to the party, was a critical part of their success. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But in terms of the day-to-day, in terms of we're going to release this single, we're going to release that single, the album's coming out on that date, we'll do this promo, nobody felt the need to dig any deeper into the band for consensus and agreement than Noel.
Yeah, okay.
So basically, if the label had an idea and they took it to Marcus, the manager, Marcus would take it to Noel.
Yeah, okay.
Noel would sign off, yes or no.
Okay.
And once Noel said it was happening, well, that was it. And his nickname amongst us all was the Chief.
Okay.
What
a weird feeling for those boys having the golden handcuffs. You win in one hand, don't you? There's your money, but we've now got you. We want you to do this. There must be a lot of pressure on the boys.
There was and any band.
And any band. How young? How old were they when you were with them?
Well, I guess they were early 20s. I suppose. I bet Liam was. I tell you, I've got 2 photographs, sadly not with me, because they tell a story. And one of them is a picture that we had to get taken in 95 for a work visa somewhere. And Liam is like this perfect, angelic, blue-eyed saint. 6 months later, I'm getting another photograph taken for a US visa. He's aged 10 years in that 6-month period, and that was I'm going to press the yes, more, louder, fun button, but B, it's graft.
Yeah.
Burning
the candles,
burning the candles. And this was the thing. You asked a question about the split between Liam and Noel.
What year roughly was that split?
Well, listen, this is an opinion, but it's founded on being there. 94, we played the Glasgow Barrowlands, coincidentally the same place as I had that little incident with Rotten.
Yeah.
The band had been up, all of them, caning it for 3 or 4 days. If you're a drummer and you cane it, your instrument is tightened, tuned, put in a box.
Yeah.
If you're a guitar player, it's cleaned, restrung, tuned, put in a box. If you're the singer, you are the instrument, right? Cocaine, it takes it out of your larynx.
Yeah.
As we flew into Glasgow, Liam was struggling a bit with the voice, but we all thought nothing of it. There's no way. Liam will bounce, he always bounces. 4 songs in to the gig, and he's lost it completely. Can't sing. He literally kicks the microphone into the security pit, storms off stage, and starts destroying the dressing room, tearing it to pieces, literally, picking this up, throwing it over there, messing the place up to the best of his ability. And he was a very able messer-upper of dressing rooms, I have to say. And he made a particularly thorough and good job of it. Noel decided, he said, well, hold on a minute. So we've got 2,500 Jockeys, right, in the Barrowlands, all going, what the fuck's going on?
Jockeys.
Noel's like, oh, well, hold on a minute, I'll sort something out. Literally, I'll sort something out. And he goes off stage and he goes to see Liam and he says, quite rightly, Liam, I know your voice is shot. They don't care. They just want to see you.
Yeah, okay.
They just want to be close to you. Come out and finish the show. Now, here's to Liam's credit. No. If I can't deliver the show that I want to deliver, I ain't delivering anything. So that night, well, two things happened. One, Noel goes back on stage, right? And he's left me to handle Liam, and he goes back on stage to have a chat with the audience. So I've had a chat with Liam, and it's like, no, I'm going back to the hotel. Right, I'll get you back to the hotel. Let me go and explain what's going on. So I walk onto the stage, right? And I stand next to Noel, next to his microphone, and this might be the highlight of my career in the music industry. Into his microphone, I say, right, Liam is completely fucked. I'm going to get him back to the hotel, and then I'll get you back to the hotel. We'll be gone before they even know we've gone. Nearly right. At which point, Noel looks at me like, you good and faithful idiot, you know.
Yeah.
And he performs acoustically.
Okay.
For the first time. He performs a set of his own songs, Oasis songs, acoustically for the first time. I take Liam back to the hotel. I don't see any of this happen, right? I put Liam to bed and I phone Marcus and I say, right, I think we've got two shows in quick succession. I said, we need to cancel them. I said, we'll reconvene in Wolverhampton. That's my idea. Marcus was like, I agree. We've got to get Noel's by him. Okay, and so as the band come back from the Barrowlands into Copthorne Hotel we were staying at in Glasgow, overlooking George Square, into the bar at the Copthorne, I'm like, right, I've got to broach this with Noel now. It's one thing to get agreement with Marcus and to get agreement with Liam, but Noel has to buy in for this to work. And I thought I'd have a very difficult conversation with him. Absolute piece of piss, because he'd really enjoyed that opportunity, that first moment where his songs, and it's a bit like Townsend and Daltrey. Daltrey interprets Townsend songs, doesn't write any of them, but he makes them something else. So Noel, for the first time, got to sing his songs.
To express his own.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he loved it.
Brilliant.
From that point forward, that acoustic Noel set, not necessarily acoustic, but the Noel set, 3, 4, 5 songs, was a part then of the choreography of the show. And then that was the beginning of the split. That was the beginning of
what I could do it myself.
I don't know that it was as pronounced as that, Dodge, but I tell you what it was. It was initially it's a brotherly sibling thing, and the arguments were kind of divided along those sorts of ridiculous lines, like what would John Lennon have to say about X if he was still alive, right? Brotherly stuff. After that, it became much more about band politics, movements, and activity. It became the beginning of a power struggle between them. So it turned from being the brotherly thing to a genuine power struggle, and then you saw the
energy change.
Energy change completely. Completely.
What sort of amounts of drugs have you seen on tour?
Well, a lot is the long story short. I think bands can remain.
Are we talking piles of cocaine? Just
let me tell you a story. I'm not going to drop the band's name.
No.
Okay. Because it was a long time ago and they all live different lives now. But we're in Barcelona, and I'm not going to tell you what the show was. A very, very high profile show. And after the show, we'd been in Spain for I think about 10 days. When you're on the road, you get paid your salary, that goes straight into your bank account, but you get paid a thing called a per diem, which I'm sure you're familiar with, a daily expense. Dependent upon the nature of the show and the size of the band, that per diem can be 20 quid a day, 50 quid a day. With this particular band, the per diem is £50 a day. Okay, there are 14 of us in the touring party, and we've taken a vote at the beginning that all of our per diems will be put in a pile and we'll buy drugs with it. So £700 a day we're spending on cocaine and some E, but mostly cocaine. At the end of the time in Spain, we're in a hotel room with a pile of cocaine that would not look at a face in Scarface, out of places. And we're trying to do it all because we can't take it back with us. You know what I mean? And we failed dismally, and we had to give, regretfully, and with no refund, fucking great bag of coke back to the promoter. So sometimes a lot, unfeasible amounts. And of course, the other thing that you have to bear in mind is that by and large, the dealers that we would come into contact with, this is not the guy that's smuggling keys, from Colombia. This is the guy that's buying maybe half a key and then jumping on it and banging it out in grams. So this is, they're not at the pinnacle of career progression, and for them, very often, almost always, we wouldn't pay. Right? The deal was very simple. If I give you some free drugs, can I hang out with you? Yeah. Can I feel part of your gang? Yeah. Right? And the answer would be yes, up to a point. One of the things that I was always tasked to do, and I always did in any event with any band, was there's a little line that certain people are not going to cross. Yeah. Right? There's a room somewhere where you ain't getting. Yeah. If you're a journalist, we'll let you in, we'll give you the AAA, you'll come back to the dressing room, but there's a place you're not going to get to. Yeah. If you're the drug dealer, we'll let you into the dressing room, but there's a place that you're not going to get to. And there's a point in the evening where we go, that's where we go. Shop. We close shop. Yeah. And whatever happens next, it happens in private.
Well, was there ever a point when you saw the two lads fighting with each other?
Yeah, there was. And this was, again, initially arguing. I mean, aggressively, but it was gone. It was here and it was gone, just like brothers do, And then post Barrowlands, it became physical. There were numerous occasions where I would have to physically separate one from the other. And again, this put me in a very difficult place. Yeah, sure. Do you know what I mean?
And you're a big man. How tall are you?
I'm only 6 foot.
You say, okay.
I'm only 6 foot, but I'm taller than they are, and I'm ex-reg.
That's right.
Do you know what I mean?
A brick shit,
but it wasn't. The issue wasn't that of physicality particularly. It was just that what those instances would do was they would poison the atmosphere of everything. They'd suck the wind out of Gwigsy's sails out of.
So the knock-on effect for the crew around is horrible.
It really.
So once
is.
It's kicked off, it's like,
here we go.
I don't want them to think I'm taking sides. I don't want to get involved.
Yeah.
Can you two just sort it out? I got down that route.
Yeah, and it was. But, and again, this comes back to an earlier part of the conversation about people skills. I probably did take sides because, in truth, in those instances where there was physical. Between Liam and Noel, 9.999 times out of 10, it was Liam that was instigating, and I was kind of defending Noel, which is not to say that Noel wouldn't step up and have a tear up with his brother, but Noel was always like,
"Come on, mate,
do you know what I mean?"
Yeah, okay.
He had a much more, and he wasn't. Noel's response to the world wasn't as emotional, kind of knee jerk bang as Liam's. I tell you, and this is an interesting thing I think about violence. I went to this military academy and I learned something. We had a thing called the boot room at school, and if you had grief with somebody, you would book a place in the boot room to resolve that grief. Fights didn't happen in those moments of heat and in those moments of anger. They happened 3 hours later at the end of the day when it's all gone. Yeah. And now you're looking at somebody, and you're not angry with him anymore, and he's not angry with you anymore, but now one of you's got to walk out of there and one of you's got to stay in there. Do you know what I mean? And that gave me a very different take on what it is to be violent. And I think Noel has that intrinsically, Liam, on the other hand, you've got that kind of knee-jerk emotional response to everything,
Who would you put your money on to tear up?
Oh, wow. There we go. I'm going to go Noel, because I think Noel has a touch of the cunning about him, Noel, I think, would allow and watch the thing develop, and he thinks very, very quickly. And I think he'd be a counterpuncher, you know. But what the fuck do I know, Dodge? Good question. Yeah,
good answer.
Out on a limb, you know what I mean?
What was your movements then when you finished with the lads? Like you got that one time when he said, right, you're out, you're fired. Were you thinking, shit, I've got to go again, or I've got to look at myself and say, how was I reacting in this situation? You know, how was I with the lads? Was I pushing the boundaries when they were wired at 5 a.m, didn't want to get out of bed to do a press conference? You must have taken a good hard look at yourself, right?
I wish that I could sit here and tell you that I had the smarts to do that. I really didn't. Okay. I think I felt slightly sorry for myself, if I'm completely honest. Do you know what I mean? And I was like, oh Christ, what now? You know, and disappointed that it had ended at all. Never mind in that way, because I was a fan of the band. How could you not be? And B, it's a very, very seductive potion to be at the centre of rock and roll, and that's what
you missed.
That's what I missed.
I bet that buzz.
You know, so you know, and there is that. You know, it's like, you know, I've been very lucky out the reg into rock and roll, so you've got that. You know what I mean? And I was lucky again, out of rock and roll into fire and rescue. Always had that A, camaraderie, B, family, C, adrenaline. Yeah. You know, so initially, very, very disappointed.
Did you stay in contact with the lads after you got fired?
I didn't really. I stayed in touch with Marcus because he and I were friends independently of my working with the band, but not like, you know, we're on the phone every day. So I stayed in touch with Marcus. I suppose it was about 6 months after the event, I thought, I'm going to write the book, you know. And I approached the band and I approached Marcus and I told him, I'm going to do this. No reply. Okay, so I'll do it. I wrote it.
Oh, so you went to them and said, do you mind if I do this?
No reply. Nothing.
Okay.
I'll do it.
All right, yeah.
I'll do it. Then I reached out and said, do you want to read it? I said, I'm not saying I'll change it necessarily, but do you want to read it? And if there's anything that really offends, and there won't be. I mean, there's 2 books you can write about anything and anybody. One is a kind account, the other's an unkind account. And I took the view that it's a kind account because I had an absolute blast with them, you know. Be that as it may, the record label tried through their lawyers to prevent it being released.
Did they?
Yeah. And so my interpretation of that was that this was probably driven by this was a consensus between the band, the management, and everybody. They didn't want it to come out
because they didn't know what you were going to say.
They did not.
Okay.
They chose not to look at it, and of course, you know, there's a lot of stories that can be told. When I wrote it, just by the by, every time I put pen to paper, and it was handwritten, literally, I had their mum on my shoulder in my mind's eye, and it was like, if I wrote this, how's it going to land with mum? How's it going to land with mum?
That's very respectful.
And that's not to say that there's not some tear-ass stories in there, but if there was an element of unkindness, what's the point?
There's no point.
What's the point?
What's the point? Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, after the event, you know, the lawyers had their conversation, the book came out. And I bumped into Noel at the NME Awards a year afterwards. And this was the only validation that I needed. We had a beer together. And he said, by the way, he said, your book, he said, it is the best account of my band that anybody's written. And it's the truth. And that was it for me.
Enough.
Yeah, that was it
for
me.
Need.
That was lovely. It was a nice closure. Yeah. Nice closure. And I went on, I did a bit more work with a few more bands. But it was coming to an end. I became a father in 1998, and very shortly after that, I realised you can't be a dad and be gallivanting around the world with rock and roll stars.
Absolutely, it
doesn't go hand in hand.
Well, it's a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, I think it probably was. I think it probably was.
Robbo, I've absolutely loved this. I know there's loads more stories in here. And anyone out there, definitely go and get this book. Where can they get it from?
I think your best bet is most decent bookstores. Waterstones, I think, have got it in most instances. If not, Amazon.
Life on Tour with Liam and Noel Gallagher by Iain Robertson. Blinding. Mate, you're an absolute legend.
Oh, I really enjoyed it.
You know what? You've lived an eventful life. And I know there's loads more stories in there as well, for sure. You're a good man.
Mate, thank you.
Cheers, Robbo. You're a gentleman,
Really
mate.
appreciate it.
Good man. Thank you, mate. Hi, guys. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Can you do us a favour and subscribe to the channel? It's totally free and it massively helps our show. Cheers, guys.